Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Caleb Rothy. I'm the Percussion Education Coordinator for WGI, and with us here this evening is Mark Thurston. He is the Director of Percussion for WGI. What we wanted to do is get together and talk a bit this evening about all the major changes that we have made to effect evaluation since we left off at the end of last season, just to make sure everybody's on the same page and kind of knows what the shifts are going to be this year. And then with a little bit of luck, we can also answer some questions tonight. So before we jump in on everything, I want to go over a little bit of housekeeping just so everybody understands how the controls work. There are two handouts that are available. If you take a look at your panel over there at some point on your screen, you'll find out the little handouts area, and you can download both of those PDFs. They are two copies of the 2016 effect rule sheets or effect judge sheets. You'll definitely want to have those on hand, a personal copy, so that you can look at your own desktop. And if you are listening to this webinar at a later date, copies of all of the sheets are available on the WGI website. Best place to go is wgi.org/education, and once you get there, head to the percussion area and then go find rules and score sheets and things of that nature. So as I said, we were going to be getting together tonight talking about changes to effect evaluation. This definitely works best when it is as interactive as possible. So we're hoping to be able to field a bunch of questions from everybody that's with us this evening, answer those questions, and provide a lot of good feedback. You have two tools available to you to ask questions. One is to click that little raise hand icon, and when either Mark or myself sees that, at some point we will call on you, just like a regular classroom setting. We will unmute your microphone, and then if you unmute on your end, you'll be able to ask a question. Everybody will be able to hear the question, and then we can give you a response. If you don't feel like vocalizing one, you can also type out a question in the questions panel over there on the side, and Mark and I will be keeping an eye on that as well. So when something comes to mind, feel free to throw a hand up or type a question out, and then when we get to kind of a natural breaking point, we'll jump in and we'll answer some of those questions. All right, let's go ahead and begin. We're going to be talking about changes to effect evaluation. This is probably best thought of as shifts that we're making this year in the way that effect is evaluated in indoor percussion. So the first thing Mark and I wanted to do is talk a little bit about how we got here, and then the process behind shifting to the big changes that we've had this year. This has really been a multi-year process. We've affectionately called it Effect 16, dating back a couple of years. And the thought process behind this was to really reimagine effect evaluation. Just think about it from the ground up. How can we best evaluate effect in our activity? Are the techniques and the methods that we're using currently the best, most state-of-the-art thing, or are there other ways that we can modify that and make it fantastic? The other thing that we really would like to share with everybody is that all of the decisions to make these changes are educationally driven decisions by the advisory board. Certainly that panel of expert instructors and designers have been talking for a couple of years about the ways in which they feel they would like additional feedback on their programs. Definitely identified that visual effect has taken off in our activity over the last 5-10 years, and questioned whether or not all of the things that were being brought to the floor could be faithfully evaluated by one person, and that kind of got us to the system that we're looking at now. So this is really driven towards trying to give more feedback to you and your educators and your designers that work with your program on all aspects of your performance, but specifically give you a lot more feedback on effect that you can use to hone and tweak and reevaluate your performance. And we kind of view that feedback in two different processes, or three really. The commentary from the judge recordings during your show, the critique opportunities, and then also numeric feedback that you can use as indicators of strengths and weaknesses. The other thing we want to share is that we've gone through multiple different versions of these sheets over the last couple of years, lots of different trials. Mark can share with you just how complex the sheets were at first and kind of how we got to this process. Mark, anything you want to add on the process of how we got here and all the changes that have taken place?
Yeah, for a second, first of all, good evening, everyone. we started by throwing effect up on the board and just putting every single consideration that we thought we could come up with and figure out what the best considerations would be as the percussion activity continues to evolve. And one of the things we started to do is try to group some of the considerations together. And what you'll see in some of the new considerations is a couple of the old ones and something that may be related to it in a little bit of a way that everyone wanted to see in effect inside some of the definitions. So that's something you're gonna see into the new considerations.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into some of these big changes for this year. First thing I want to do is clear the air a little bit with what has not taken place, just so that everybody's on the same page. I definitely have heard a couple of people go, well, really, the system's pretty much the same as it was before, right? You just added visual effect. And that's not true. The effect caption has completely been rewritten really from the ground up. So it's more than just adding visual effect, but really recalibrating how we're going to go about evaluating that in the activity. So for those that may be new to this, it's now going to feature 2 judges evaluating the effectiveness of your performance. Those 2 judges are going to use 2 different sheets and be in 2 different captions, effect music and effect visual. But those 2 will really work in concert to recognize and reward all the fantastic things that the designers and the performers are bringing to life in that performance. So there's going to be a lot of parallel structure to both of these, and the hope is that the 2 work in concert to give you a great totality of feedback with regards to the effect performance that you have. So let's talk a little bit about the breakdowns of some of these captions. Effect music, as I referenced before, is the first one of them. It's worth 30% of your total score. The other one is effect visual, which is worth 20% of your total score. So those 2 together comprise 50% of an ensemble's total score at the end of the contest. Within effect music, there are 2 different subcaptions, overall effect and music effect. Each one of those is going to be worth 15% of the total score. And then in effect visual, the 2 subcaptions are overall effect and visual effect, each worth 10% of the total score. So you'll see up on the screen right now a little bit of color coding, and the colors here are pretty instructive and beneficial. The first thing I'd like to point out is that the overall effect subcaptions are parallel in nature. Those 2 match each other and go hand in hand. They are literally identical. So we're asking both judges to evaluate the overall effectiveness of your performance. Then the 2 other subcaptions that we have, music effect and visual effect, will be parallel subcaptions. They'll be very, very similar, but specific to the domain of either the music and the effectiveness of just the music as a component, and then the effectiveness of the visual as a component. So those 2 will have a very parallel structure and will be highly related. So you can see right from the beginning the effort that has gone into this to try to make sure that the 2 things complement each other and that really are working to give us a nice holistic evaluation of what we see on the floor. So for those that may be new to this and are trying to wrap their head around overall effect, music effect, visual effect, how can each one of these coexist? What are they going to entail? How do I explain this to my performers and my students? How do I explain this to my parents? This is the best that I have right now for you, and I think this works pretty well. It is admittedly a slightly flawed analogy, like it's not perfect. But I think this is a pretty good way to explain it to somebody that is perhaps new to this idea. You can think of overall effect as kind of like a best picture category. So if we're talking about the Academy Awards, the Oscars coming up, what we will be referring to as the best picture is the best totality of the movie. So the best craft of movie making with everything pulled in together, the screenwriting, the acting, the set design, the sound editing, all of that will come together and hopefully give us a best picture. So our overall effect category is in essence our best picture category. The music effect category would be kind of analogous to the best original score category for the Academy Awards. So this is the best piece of music that goes to enhance a movie and kind of bring that to life. And then the visual effect subcaption can be kind of thought of as a best cinematography category. So I'm sure it doesn't take too much of a stretch to think about a movie that may be the best picture in a number of different ways, but maybe there's a separate movie that has the best original composition that year. Or other times in a different year, you may have one film that is both the best picture and the best cinematography, or the best picture and the best original score. So I think our system is going to be very adaptable to being able to reward each of those components individually. And when you first get that numeric feedback, or you're first starting to listen to your commentary and digest what it is that you're getting input on, you can kind of think about it in those terms. So effect for 2016 and beyond, the first thing to understand is that we have 2 effect judges. They're going to be drawing on 2 areas of expertise, one with a great deal of expertise in kind of a musical background and musical domain, the other in a visual background, visual domain. But we're really going to be asking them to evaluate your program via one approach. We want them to both understand the tools and the systems really well, and we're going to ask both of those individuals to evaluate the overall effect of that performance that you bring to life. The 2 judges are going to be looking at the same kinds of things, but really when they do this, they're going to be looking at it through a different lens, and they're going to be drawing on different experiences and backgrounds. So the music judge will obviously be looking at things through a musical lens. That is their forte, that is their background, that's where they have expertise, and so there are going to be certain aspects of your performance that will really speak to them because of those experiences, and then vice versa on the visual side as well. So we're going to ask them both to evaluate the totality. We're going to ask them both to evaluate their own particular areas of expertise, and that should give us a really strong evaluation of the effectiveness of all the performances that we've seen. So I've mentioned this word a couple times already, and it definitely bears repeating here. Holistic evaluation is what we're after. I know several of the people that were co-authors on this sheet, that's really what a lot of them set out to do, was to try to make sure that we continued down the path of evaluating our programs holistically, not trying to slice and dice everything into different aspects, but really get a sense of the big picture. And I think that's what we've maintained with this system. We've done that by using unified sheets. The overall effect subcaptions are literally identical, and that is by design. It's not by accident. It was intentional. And the music and visual subcaptions are parallel in structure, and again, that was by design. We wanted similar language, similar aspects that we were looking for over the course of the evaluation. With all that said, I think it would definitely benefit all of us to be aware that differences of opinion are going to be taking place. You should expect differences of opinion. And this is going to be sometimes minor and sometimes major. But when you look at the 2 overall effect numbers, those may not always be in concert. Those 2 judges may not always have the same assessment of the performance, and we'll talk about why in a second. But even within the 2 subcaptions, there may be big differences between your ensemble's level of overall effect generated that day compared to what it was from purely a musical perspective and the effect that was generated there. So there may be dramatic differences between those 2 subcaptions from one judge, and then there may be dramatic differences between the 2 judges. We're kind of going into the process knowing that and embracing that and thinking that that's actually a healthy thing. Since this activity is so driven based on backgrounds and experiences, we know that that's just a part of the activity. So really one of the things that we've tried to do is to look at this as not a monolithic sheet or a caption, but really as a hybrid of those 4 different numbers you're going to get and those 2 different sets of commentary. If you were to take all of that and hopefully find the average, and that's what the bold numbers at the end of the recap all the way on the right hand side will tell you, that's going to be the average of all this feedback that you get. So a second in overall effect from one judge and a 5th in overall effect from the other judge probably means you were somewhere in between 2nd best and 5th best in that realm. They're probably going to average out to about 3rd or 4th. And that's probably right where the ensemble should be. So we know that going in, and it would be certainly very, very beneficial to you as an instructor or director to know that going in as well, that the system is designed to average those things out, and that's truly where the ensembles will lie. All right, so what I'd like to do now is jump into a couple of the sheets. Now would be a great time to grab those. If you've got those downloaded to your desktop, pull that up so that you can take a look at the details. First thing that you will notice right here at the beginning of the sheet is that aesthetically it's gotten a huge facelift. We've redesigned the whole entire thing, new and fresh, and we certainly want it to feel new and fresh. So as you take a look at it, you're going to notice that right off the bat. There's a paragraph up here in the upper right-hand corner. I've got it highlighted yellow right now. This is a really instructive paragraph for you as an instructor or as a designer to take a look at. This will kind of give you focus for this sheet, and it'll help you get your bearings about what is it that this evaluator is going to be crediting over the course of your performance. And then if this is the first time that you've looked at the sheet, you'll notice that the list of considerations for overall effect and music effect are much shorter than our previous effect tool was. We've really tried to rein these in and pick some large umbrella terms on the front that will have a lot of depth as defined on the back, but it's allowed us to decrease the number of overarching things that we're looking for, and hopefully allow the judges to really hone in on a couple of those key areas and give you some great insight and great feedback. So on this sheet, the first thing that I'd like to do is take a look at the overall effect side of things. We've got 6 considerations there: program, creativity, communication, engagement, coordination, and range of effects. And these are identical on both the effect music sheet and the effect visual sheet. It's these exact same 6 considerations and with the exact same definitions. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper, and we'll take a look at some of those key terms. All right, the first thing that we have on here is program, and this is a very new term to our sheet. You won't find an analog to this on the old tool, but I think as you read the definition, you'll see how it encompasses a lot of different things in this. Program is defined as the plan that guides and motivates all design choices, presenting opportunities for inherent and manufactured effectiveness. The effective blend of musical, visual, and programmatic choices, which provides a vehicle for emotional, intellectual, and aesthetic communication. Man, that is a weighty definition. There's a lot to unpack in here. So if this is the first time that you're taking a look at a couple of these definitions, I definitely encourage you to do a little bit of follow-up study after this webinar, and just make sure that you become very comfortable and familiar with all the particulars of this. Program right from the outset talks about the plan. So we're really going to be crediting the plan that comes together, and this is going to be purely something from the design and development team of your program. The way that we're able to respond to that program is going to be how well that plan helps to guide and motivate all of those design choices that you use. So you can think about this as the theme or the mood that you're setting or the context for the entire performance that's happening today. All of those things will be kind of encompassed in this idea of program. It also references inherent and manufactured effectiveness. Inherent effectiveness would be just picking source material or a thematic concept that is in and of itself something that is attractive and interesting and makes people curious and want to know more and want to see more. And then we can also credit the manufactured effectiveness, your craft in making that program come to life, making it interesting, pulling the audience into that. So that's what the evaluators will be able to credit with regard to program. Also talks about blending different ideas together, blending musical, visual, and programmatic choices together. So not music by itself, visual by itself, or program by itself, but really how do all these components work together? How well is it blended to be seamless and to feel organic and well connected? And then finally, you'll see the Triad of Effect explicitly laid out at the bottom of this. We're looking for the program that you and your students are putting together this year to connect with the audience emotionally, intellectually, and aesthetically. And the way that they're going to do that is with their communication skills, both in what you've given them and the ability of the performers to bring it to life. So for my money, on the overall effect side of things, program is one of the newest and one of the most important things that we have on here. Certainly something you're going to want to spend a lot of time with and become very comfortable with the idea of what this is and how it's been defined. All right, next up is creativity. We had this on the previous tools. The definition has been slightly tweaked though. Going forward, it is originality, uniqueness, and imagination infused into the overall program and presentation. So anything in your program that piques interest, that feels new and fresh and original and inspires imagination, that's all going to fall within the guise of creativity. Creativity, we as we were putting the sheet together, long talked about, it's one of those hallmarks of effect. When is something effective? When there's a sense of creativity to it. So this is obviously high up on the sheet and a big priority for all of us. Both of those first two aspects are really design considerations, things that you and your staff are going to be bringing to the table. The next one is purely about the performers and how they bring the program to life. Communication is defined as the performance techniques that effectively express ideas and connect with the audience. So these are all the techniques, the devices, the tools that they use that will help express the ideas that you've given them, and all of the ways in which they're going to be able to establish that connection with the audience and make it feel real and make it feel now and make it feel well connected and desirable to want to see right now and to obviously want to see again. So you'll notice this sheet continues to be a mix of what and how together at the same time. The two cannot be pulled apart, and we really thought long and hard about that as we're talking about effect. It's really the marriage of the what and the how together, working together, that creates something that's highly effective. Digging a little bit deeper, our next word is engagement. This is new to this sheet as well, but some of these ideas are informed by the previous use of entertainment on the old sheets. Engagement is defined as the ability to secure, captivate, and sustain the attention of the audience. And this is going to be two-pronged. This is both engagement as it relates to a program that is engaging and keeps me wanting to be tuned in for the next couple of moments, but also the performer's ability to engage me and keep me connected. So this is really one of those, we were just talking about what and how being fused together, and that's what engagement is. So as you're thinking about this, as you're talking about it with your students, you want to talk to them about securing and captivating the audience's attention. But once you have the audience eating out of the palm of your hand, how do you sustain that attention? How do you keep the audience totally dialed in, hanging on the edge of their seat for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 4 minutes? How do you, from the word go to the last note that you play, how are you able to captivate and sustain that attention? That's what we can respond to with engagement. Coordination, defined as the harmonious combination and interaction of musical and visual elements that together elevate the program. A couple big takeaways for me here. It's the combination of music and visual elements. That can be a music idea to another music idea. How well coordinated are those? That can be visual to visual coordination. It can also be music to visual coordination. So it's coordinating all of those different components together. In here, a couple things that jump out at me are harmonious combination. We're looking for combinations that work with great harmony. It seems symbiotic and creates a great deal of synergy whenever those elements are happening. And then also talking about this elevating the program. These different combinations take the program to new heights, elevate it, and bring us to new places because of the degree of coordination. And the last term on overall effect is range of effects. This is a big one. The varied displays of programmatic effectiveness through time via pacing and continuity, and in isolation via planned events and punctuations. Lot to unpack with this, just as there was with program. In here, you'll notice at the beginning, varied displays of programmatic effectiveness. This means not going back to the well over and over and over again for the same effect, done the same way, with the same results. We all know those would be diminishing results if you continue to do that. So we're looking for varied displays of effectiveness. What's the variety of ways in which you can generate effect for the audience? We're looking at this through time via both your pacing and your continuity. How well connected are the first 10 ideas to the next 10 ideas? How well paced is it? How well are you able to keep us engaged through that pacing? And then we're also talking about both horizontal construction here and the vertical construction. So isolation via a planned event and punctuation. We talked about through time. There's our horizontal pacing and continuity. And now we're going to talk about those arrival moments, the vertical aspects of your performance where everything came together and you gave us a punctuation point, or you pulled off a particular event that everything had been building to, either an emotional and programmatic high point or a programmatic low point, but those pieces of punctuation that serve as the cornerstones of the performance. So all of that will be wrapped up as part of range of effects. All right, so obviously this one is going to be huge for us and very weighty because we see overall effect judged twice. We're going to get the effect music judge to weigh in on what they think our performance, our overall effect performance is, and then we're going to get also the effect visual judge to weigh in on their evaluation of our ability to generate overall effect. So it's through those two different perspectives and kind of taking that all together that I think you'll get a true feel for how your show's reading right now. What are the strengths of the presentation? What are the weaknesses of the presentation? What do we need to do to continue to make this fire on all cylinders? This is the part where those two things are going to come together. And I want to take a second right now to share one additional thing with you. I frequently get questions about, if the sheets are the same and all these words are the same here, then how could two judges read us so differently in overall effect? And I think the simplest way to do this is to just think about, as kind of an example, some programmatic choices you could make. There are some shows that are going to hit people differently. For example, if you're doing a show about a cancer survivor, and one of the effect evaluators has some personal experience with that or has a history of that in their family or something like that, that show will innately speak to that person very differently than somebody that doesn't have that necessarily life experience. So as just as an example, you could be equally good at your performance in the eyes of both of those people, but one of them is going to be to much greater effect because of the subject matter and because of the material that you chose to dive into. So just an example as simple as that, and there are literally thousands of these that we could pull out, but that's going to weigh into the way that your show reads from an effect performance. That's always been true. It's true whether it's in the indoor activity or any other marching arts activity, but it's something that bears thinking about here at the beginning, especially since you're going to get two sets of input now from two people with very different backgrounds and very different experiences.
Caleb?
Yes, sir.
Just a second. We experienced this a little bit when we have double panels at championships where staff members will often ask the differences between two effect judges. Well, now we're going to have that not only vertically but horizontally between these captions. So it's something you all going to have to be aware of when we start to get into a world championship scenario where we have 4 people judging effect. You're going to see that difference.
I was talking about this with a steering committee member recently, and we were trying to wrap our heads around this whole shift. And really the best way to explain it is we are just now going to essentially have a double panel for overall effect at all regular WGI events. And in some ways at World Championships, you're going to have a quad panel for overall effect. And that's going to be actually, I think, really cool because you'll get 4 people to weigh in on the overall effectiveness of the performance. And like we talked about earlier, the mean of all of those reads will probably shake out to pretty realistically what the results from that contest were.
Agreed.
All right, let's jump on over to the other subcaption now, the one on the right side of this sheet. Let's talk about music effect. We've got 5 different considerations to look at here. Let's start off with the first one. Up at the top of the sheet is musical journey. And I should mention none of these are more important than the other ones. The ranking isn't like a first to last, but they are carefully crafted to kind of flow through the sheet. So we start with the musical journey, and that's not by accident. This is new to our marching classes, but this is actually well connected to the concert classes. We've had this idea of musical journey in our activity on the concert side of things for a number of years, and the timing felt appropriate to also infuse it into our marching classes. It is defined as the effective use of repertoire and orchestration techniques to establish and sustain the intellectual, emotional, and aesthetic relationships over time. So this is kind of the parallel to the program category that we had in the overall effect. But now we're looking at the program as just purely a musical journey. What is the musical journey that you've taken the audience on today? That's going to be a combination of repertoire choices and orchestration techniques that you've used in there. We're certainly going to be trying to use those 2 different components, repertoire and orchestration, to fulfill the triad of effect, to be able to engage the audience intellectually, emotionally, and aesthetically. So this is where we're going to be able to respond to the musical journey that you have crafted and laid out and defined with all of those same peaks and valleys and range of effect, but now all specifically as it relates to the musical choices in the program. Second thing you'll see is creativity. It's also on the overall effect side of things. So now this is creativity specifically as it relates to music effect considerations, defined as originality, uniqueness, and imagination infused into the musical program and presentation. So now the evaluator can respond to your creativity through purely a musical lens. To what degree is the music that you're creating, the musical program, infused with creativity? That's what we're looking for here. Next will be musicianship, and this one is a long and comfortable term for us at this point, defined now as the understanding and artistic sensitivity of the written score through expression, blend, balance, and idiomatic interpretation. So we're going to be talking about all aspects of musicianship, and musicianship that creates an effect for the audience musically is what we're looking at here. So when you're talking to your students about this is all for them. This is their opportunity to be effective through their musicianship. You want to talk to them about their expression. You want to talk to them about artistic sensitivity. Certainly this is the most appropriate place to evaluate the blend and balance of your ensemble, and this is where we can also credit and reward idiomatic interpretation, stylistic choices that your ensemble makes to great effect. Next two considerations on this sheet are artistry. Artistry is defined as the subtlety, nuance, detail, craft, and proficiency that elevate the fit and finish of the presentation. For me, this one is huge, and I think this may be a huge differentiator in our activity going forward. This is where we're able to credit and reward all of the subtle, nuanced, detailed aspects that you bring to the table, all the choices that you make in terms of your musical restraint in moments. This is where that can be credited and rewarded. Anything that you do that elevates the feeling of fit and finish to the presentation. So this is going to be a big differentiator, because this is going to be able to reward the groups that have that musical range and are able to bring forth great sense of artistry while still playing their percussion instruments in a very physical and visceral way. And then the last one that we have defined on here is excellence as effect, defined as the virtuosity or technical proficiency of the performers that elicits positive responses from the listener. So when the evaluators are crediting excellence as effect, they are crediting moments of virtuosity or technical proficiency. Whenever you have chosen to showcase, like, hey, our effect in this moment is the virtuosity of the performers, we can give it up. Our effect in this moment is the technical proficiency of the ensemble, we can give it up. That's what we're looking to reward. Obviously with the goal that that technical proficiency will elicit a positive response from the listener as opposed to the negative response from the listener. So the one thing that you want to know here is that any moment where the sheer technical excellence becomes an effect in and of itself, this is where you're going to be credited and rewarded for that. The flip side of that coin, though, is moments that are set up for the technical excellence to be the effect may not be very effective if the technical excellence isn't there. So that's the flip side of the coin. If you're going to put it out there as this feature is really what we're going for as our effect package here, we want to make sure that we're able to deliver on that virtuosity. All right, so the next thing that we'll take a look at are the visual effect considerations in just a second. Do want to pause here for just a second and see if we've got any additional questions that anybody has and would like to discuss.
Caleb, we do have a question from Calvin. He asks, in A class, is it just best to literally lay out what your show is about? So we've had issues where we try to be more intellectual and have gotten quotes like, I don't know what your show is about.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer to this really transcends classes. I think in every class, your show should be easy to understand and easily readable. Anytime we leave the audience in the dark or feeling confused at the end is probably a performance that has not been very effective, regardless of what class you're in. It is true that our classes are evaluated on a sliding scale. So obviously we're looking for more depth and complexity and sophistication in world class than would in A class. As to whether or not you should lay out in the beginning exactly everything, I'll leave that on a group-to-group basis to figure out what works best for your vehicle and your vision for that year. but I will share that most of the time the shows that speak to me in A class the most are the ones that are very easy to read from a first performance, and ones that are immediately connecting with the audience and fully engaging the audience on a first read. I think that's very skill appropriate, skill set appropriate for that class when we talk about basic design principles and basic choices, programmatic choices in there. We're looking for things that just work, that just fit really well together. So I would kind of use that as your guiding light for how do we best engage and generate effect for the audience.
That's it.
All right, let's jump into the effect visual sheet. You'll see now here the sister sheet of the one that we were looking at before. Very similar layout, same design aesthetic, overall effect on the left side, same exact words, and visual effect on the right side, very similar phrases. Now instead of the musical journey, we have the visual journey. Creativity is still there. Instead of musicianship, which relates musically, we have musicality, which is the visual counterpoint to that. Artistry remains here, as does excellence as effect, but now they're all going to be through a visual lens and applying those terms visually to your performance. Another same great paragraph in the upper right-hand corner, highlighted yellow for you right now. Definitely something to that would be worth taking a look at for you and the rest of your design team. All right, let's dive a little bit deeper over here on the visual effect considerations. Starting off with the visual journey, very similar to the concept that we had with the musical journey, but defined a little bit differently. The effective use of form, movement, color, and characterization to establish and sustain intellectual, emotional, and aesthetic relationships over time. So we're still looking for that triad of effect. Are you establishing and sustaining intellectual, emotional, and aesthetic relationships with the visual journey that you take us on? But no longer is it defined as repertoire and orchestration. Now we're crediting your use of form in your program. We're crediting the use of movement, of color, and perhaps characterization to bring your visual journey to life. So you want to have a lot of depth here. You want to pull from all four of those different elements and make sure that it's establishing and sustaining those triad of effect considerations we've discussed. Creativity defined exactly the same way as it is on the other sheet. Originality, uniqueness, and imagination infused into the visual program and presentation. Musicality here is going to be the, as I mentioned, the counterpoint to musicianship. So here's what we would want to talk to our performers about doing from a visual musicality standpoint. Understanding an artistic sensitivity of the written work that accurately reflects, interprets, expresses, and enhances the music. We're looking for the visual aspects of your performance to reflect the musical choices, to interpret those, to visually express the musical ideas, and ultimately, if all goes well, enhance all of the musical choices that have been made in the program. So those two components will work together, your musicianship and your musicality, two sides of the same coin. Artistry, defined the same way that it is on the music effect side, but now we're referring to visual artistry, subtlety, nuance, detail, craft, and proficiency that elevate the fit and finish of the presentation. And finally, excellence as effect. Now we're going to be crediting virtuosity or technical proficiency in purely visual moments, visual aspects that you bring to the table, feats of visual greatness, if you will, that will elicit a positive response from the viewer. This is what can be credited here. Flip side of that is if you've set up a moment for the visual virtuosity or the visual technical proficiency to be the effect in and of itself, you want to make sure that you're bringing forth a great deal of quality to the table to fulfill this consideration. All right, so that's a look deep inside the sheets. Those are all the things that you need in order to fully understand the major shifts that we've had this year and to get yourself prepared to talk to your students about fulfilling these considerations, and also get yourself prepared to listen to judge commentary and to jump into critiques. So that's what I want to talk about next. What can you do now other than just attending this webinar? The first thing I would recommend is to study the sheets, study the considerations, study the definitions, know those tools, know how they're broken out, what's in each one of the subcaptions, what are the different considerations that the judge will be looking for, What are the different considerations that you, your staff, and your performers are trying to bring to life? And not just, yeah, I know the word musicianship. True, but there are lots of different definitions of the word musicianship. Do you know the definition that we're using in this activity as defined on the back? So the more familiar you are with those things, the more naturally it will come to you during rehearsal when you're trying to make choices about how do we squeeze every last bit of effect out of the performance. You'll be able to fall back on your understanding of, oh, am I doing this? Am I doing this? Am I doing this? Do I have enough of this? If you're familiar with all those considerations and definitions. Next thing that I would recommend is to share these details with your performers. I can't stress this enough. I can't encourage you to do this enough. Many of us, and I did this in my younger days teaching because I was always so focused on get the show out there and then get it clean and try to get all the errors out there. It took me until I was much older and much more mature to realize that, hey, spending a little bit of rehearsal time to sit down and give your performers copies of the sheets and talk about what engagement means and talk to them about what we're looking for in terms of musicianship and artistry and other aspects like that basically turns them into little miniature staff members themselves, because now they innately understand what it is that you're asking of them. When you say, hey, I need you to increase the degree of expression during this phrase, they more acutely are aware of why that's important and perhaps how to do that in a little bit more efficient and natural manner. So really sharing these details with them so that they know what the audience and what the evaluators are going to be looking for, hugely positive, hugely beneficial.
It becomes a great teaching tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it basically is your curriculum when you know the sheet well and you start to share it with your students. So when you stop protecting the content on the test, so to speak, and you start telling them what's going to be on the test on Saturday when they get to the show, it makes them so much better at fulfilling those different ideas. The other thing I would ask you to do after you've prepped your performers is over the course of the season, equally consider your musical and your visual devices to generate effect. Go down your list of the different tools, the different aspects of contrast that you have in your performance and all those other different devices that you use to generate effect, and make sure that you have a nice strong mix of both music and visual devices to bring your show to life. Many of us, when we pick a show, it may be a little bit more musically heavy or visual heavy to begin with. And our job is to try to balance those two aspects out and make it seem seamless and well connected between all of those. So my tip on that is to perpetually reevaluate your performance. Now that you know what's on the sheet and what they're asking of you, constantly be in this process of reevaluating your performance. Is this effective enough? Have I spent enough time on this? Is this paced right? Does this have the right amount of range to it? Do we have enough sensitivity here? Do we have something that will elicit a response here? So on and so forth. That's a hugely powerful tool to maximizing your program's potential.
It's really going to help those A-class ensembles graduate up to the open class levels, because typically what we see in A-class is music done really well or visual done really well and not both. But when they start to do both together, we start to mature more as individuals, and we start to run into the intermediate paradigm. So it's something you can use too.
And let's also not forget that basic skills and concepts done really well, like if you do basic musical aspects really well and basic visual aspects really well, that's the recipe, so to speak, to be most successful in that class. So it's not about trying to do a bunch of intermediate things and hope that it resonates in A, but it's take those basic devices and do them well. I mean, study these sheets and go, let me do all of my basic musicianship at the highest level of that concept of basic. And do that with everything else. And then, substitute the word intermediate instead of basic. And now you have the recipe to be highly successful at the top end of open class or the top end of world class. So those are all great things to keep in mind. All right, that's the end of the webinar that Mark and I have for you this evening. What we'd like to do now is open it up for any additional questions that anybody has. So if there's a question that you want to raise your hand and ask, just tap that little raise a hand button and we'll unmute your line. If you've got one that you want to type in, you're welcome to do that as well. We'll hang around for a few more minutes and answer any additional questions that come in. All right, if you'll be leaving us here at this point this evening, if you don't have any additional questions at this point, you're always welcome to email in with a question later. I can be reached at caleb@wgi.org. Just send me an email there. I'm here as a resource for you. Any questions that you have, anything I can do that will help make you more successful and get you the information you need to have the best season possible, feel free to hit me up. You're also welcome to email Mark additionally if you have any questions for him going forward. I want to thank you very much for coming out and joining us this evening or watching this on video after the fact. We really appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to better understand the activity. And I want to wish you the absolute best of luck with your season. I hope it's fantastic for you and for your students.
Caleb, Chad just chimed in with one. He says, regardless of lens, are the effect judges to evaluate overall effect first, as is laid out in the sheet?
Can you read that one more time?
It says, regardless of the lens of the effect judges, are they to evaluate overall effect first? And we know that that is yes.
Yeah, the directive that we've given to the WGI panels that we have, and also our recommendation to local circuit judges who we did a webinar for the last couple of weeks, is to work this sheet from left to right. So to think holistically first, think about the overall effect, receive the show as a complete picture, and use that to then dive down into your particular domain and area of expertise. So receive it holistically first, and then comment about specifically the musical aspects that fulfilled and extended that holistic picture, or the visual aspects secondarily.
Okay, Jonathan asks, any advice for circuits still using a 3-judge panels but using competition suite? And go ahead.
Yeah, my recommendation on this is to use the same point totals that you did in the past, and each week pick either the effect music sheet if your GE judge is more music driven, or the effect visual sheet if your general effect judge is more visually driven, and then use the same point totals from previous years. That's our recommendation. And if you're using competition suite, it's really awesome. When you go to set up a show, you get to pick whether it's going to be a 4-caption show or a 3-caption show. So all you have to do is pick the 3-caption show and then type in all of the scores, and it'll do all the math behind the scenes for you. So we recommend still the regular music sheet, the regular visual sheet, and then pick one of either effect music or effect visual for that particular event.
And I got one more. Tyree asks, dealing with the visual from a music standpoint, how do you get the pit more involved? I guess he meant from an effect standpoint. Dealing visual from an effect standpoint, how do you get the pit more involved?
Yeah, I think that's it's tough, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Obviously, the front ensemble is a huge, massive weight to the visual design, so the way that you have staged them is going to greatly impact a lot of the other visual aspects that happen over the course of the performance, so that's really important. Outside of that, you want to talk to your performers about doing everything that they can to enhance the performance. So like mallets up, mallets down, things like that. You want to use that as emphasis in certain points and not necessarily as a distraction. So mostly as a front ensemble to be more engaged visually in the performance, it's about bringing attention your direction when you want that to be, and it's about not being a distraction when you don't want them to be. You know, awkward instrument changes that distract from our attention on the floor and things of that nature. Outside of that, I think the front ensemble's job is to be great communicators, both musically and visually as they play their instruments. I think that's the primary way that they're going to be able to connect with the audience from a visual standpoint, is being very engaged in their performance and being very compelling to watch them perform their program.
Okay, Chris asks, am I correct in understanding that the visual GE judges are viewing elements of the program primarily as they relate to the musical program, or are the visual elements evaluated independently of the musical program?
Chris, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I'll take a crack at it, and then you're welcome to send me a follow-up email if I don't get the whole thing correct. So we don't have visual GE judges necessarily. We do have somebody that is judging a effect visual sheet. And in that caption, they're going to respond to both the whole thing, like everything, the whole enchilada, all the music, all the visual, all the costuming, all the design choices, the narration, everything that you do. That's going to be one of the things that they're charged with evaluating. That's half of their job, essentially. Then the other half of the job will be strictly dialing down to what are the visual elements, the purely visual aspects of the performance that have generated effect in and of themselves. So not the analytical, not the construction of the visual, not the, tenor 3 moves 3 steps on a 35-degree angle, not those things, but to what extent have those visual choices been effective as part of the performance. So in that respect, yeah, both the effect music judge will be watching visual things that happen and will be moved by that, and the effect visual judge will be listening to musical things that happen and will be affected by that. Just as when we go to a movie, we may not have all the expertise in the craft of cinematography, but we are still taken in by camera angles and lighting and costuming and things of that nature that help contribute to making the movie that we're watching really compelling and really enjoyable. I think that's probably the best way to look at it.
Okay, there's a question, is music still 40%? No, music is 30% now that we have the extra 10% in effect. And we did do a couple webinars a couple weeks ago that you'll be able to watch, which go into the entire system in detail for new judges. So you might want to check those out.
Yeah, and this, if you missed the first part of it, we did talk about the percentage breakdowns in like the first 15 minutes or so of the webinar. When we put this one up online, you'll be able to log back in and rewatch this webinar. So if there's parts that you missed, you're welcome to dive in and take a look. If there's things that we didn't cover that you want to know more detail about, definitely you can reach out to us.
Ian asks, is coordination essentially replacing audio to visual?
Yes, we had a conversation about that.
Overall effect subcap.
Yeah, I think I was the one that brought this up when we were having the conversation about it, that audio to visual coordination is really just coordination. So a better term than trying to say audio / visual, which is the way that it used to be, was strip out the adjectives and just go with this idea of coordination. Well, what kind of coordination? Maybe it's music to music. Maybe it's audio to audio. Maybe it's visual to visual. Maybe it's audio to visual. Maybe it's visual to audio, but open it up so that the evaluators can respond to all the aspects that demonstrate coordination.
Looks like that might be it.
Hey, I see we've got one hand raised. Chris, you've got your hand. I'm not sure if we already asked your question or not, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line. And, oh, I think he just took care of that himself. Okay, never mind. I think I see one other one in here. Do you think there will be any issues adding the new visual GE dealing with cross-caption judging, meaning conflicts? I'm not sure, Tyree, exactly how to read that question. So if you want to try typing that out again and taking another crack at it, I'm not sure I totally understand it.
I think you might be looking at the the different lenses, and that we should really expect to have differences of reads.
Yeah, I think what's important to remember is that the sheet is not general effect anymore. It's also not music effect and visual effect like you may see in a marching band circuit. It's effect music and effect visual. So both of these judges are going to be evaluating the effect that your performance has today, the degree to which you have been effective. Both judges are charged with evaluating two things. One is the overall, so everything. And in that sense, they will be cross-captioning because their caption is the whole entire thing. And that's not new. We've had that for a long time. The old GE sheet was music effect is one consideration, and then overall effect is the other consideration. So there were no lanes in that regard before, where it was like, no, you're the GE judge. You can't talk about visual effect. And you can talk about everything you want. We just now have two people that can talk about the whole entire thing. and then can also discuss their the particulars of their areas of strength. Really good question from Brent. He says, did the trial show any skew to overall ranking or rating? I think we can share that it did show very little skew to the overall ranking or rating. Once we use these numbers with this point distribution, the outcomes of all the shows ended up the same, except for a couple of spots, like a 4 and 5 switched. A couple of other places. A class was actually where we saw the most dramatic shifts sometimes, but those dramatic shifts were like 4th place became 6th place and 5th place became 4th place, and just small little changes like that. I think in the regionals that we tested it in and at World Championships, the couple classes we did test there, none of the top 3 changed. So we looked at this and said, well, it wouldn't have changed the world champion in any classes or the regional champion in any classes, and it wouldn't have changed the medal holders in any of those classes. But a couple of other places down the recap a little bit, there were some minor shifts here and there. And that may or may not play out the same way this season once we're, whole hog every regional and world championships. But in the trials that we did, very minor changes other than beefing up the amount of feedback that those groups were getting as part of our educational offering.
Which is the main reason we're doing it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was hoping that these shifts would change the outcomes of the contest. I'm sure we've all been to a contest where we placed 1 or 2 spots lower than we really wanted to, but on par, most people feel like given enough time, when they look back, they go, you know what? These results are pretty much coming out the way that they should, to the extent that there is a should. But I think the goal wasn't necessarily to shift all of those and to overturn that apple cart, but to make sure that the shows were faithfully being evaluated to the degree that we know you guys spend putting in lots of time trying to bring them to life and create something amazing for the audience.
Hey, with any new system, everybody, you're going to have to expect that we're going to have some continued refinement that's going to happen over the course of the year and over the next couple of years. And we expect that. But we really feel as though we got a head start on this one.
Yeah, just editorially, I'm really pleased with the system that we have going forward. I think there's a lot of great terminology on there for the judges to use to give you feedback, and I think there are lots of great expectations for both the judges and for you guys as educators and designers to really be at your best and trying to create a program that is captivating, engaging, enthralling, and then allow the judges to reward and credit all of those great efforts of you and your performers. So I think it's going to be really positive things, but there's definitely going to be an adjustment period where we're all getting used to the system. All right, looks like we've pretty much cleared out all the questions on this for this particular webinar. As I said before, if something comes to you a little bit later on that you're thinking of and you want to get an answer to that particular question, don't hesitate to hit us up via email. Again, really appreciate you spending a little bit of time tonight. I know some people bailed out of rehearsal in order to be here or rushed home, and we really do appreciate you doing that for the benefit of your program and for your students and the activity at large. So again, thank you very much for doing that, and have a fantastic season this year.